So as energy demand grows and the climate imperative accelerates, we already have heard several times today that no single country within the region or even globally can go it alone. So building really robust cross-border infrastructure such as the ASEAN power grid and green energy corridors across Central and South Asia can unlock shared renewable energy potential, strengthen energy security, which is a critical issue within our region, and provide the flexibility that those modern energy systems demand. But as we've also heard already today, the path to integration is not straightforward. So financing large-scale infrastructure, ensuring that really critical regulatory alignment, achieving real-time interoperability across borders all remain very persistent hurdles. So today I'm very fortunate to tell you that we will be hearing from leading experts who will share their case studies and emerging strategies to overcoming these challenges. From the economic dividends of ASEAN interconnectors to analytics-driven power trade in the Himalayas, these insights will help us understand not just how to connect grids, but also how to really align the institutions, the markets and the investments to power a just and sustainable future. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to our first speaker, Ivana Dimitrova from the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office in the UK. She's been part of the ASEAN modelling team, and she's going to share some of her results from their regional power trade simulations, revealing cross-border interconnectors and how they can lower costs, reduce emissions and deliver real-time and real socio-economic dividends. So Ivana, please join us on the stage.
Afternoon, everyone. Last session of the day, hopefully. We won't be too long before the networking. I'm just waiting for my clicker, and this is a stalling technique. But maybe while I stall, maybe I could just introduce myself. So I'm Ivana. I'm an energy advisor at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, as Penny just introduced, and maybe a bit of background to our research on the development dividend of the ASEAN power grid. So development dividend, that's a bit of a strange concept. Maybe you haven't heard it before, but by way of background and how this all started, in the UK FCDO, we were wondering, are cross-border interconnection projects just engineering and climate tools, or are they actually smart development investments? Do they merit investment in terms of development and climate finance from the likes of the UK FCDO? And actually, when you take these interconnector projects to, let's say, finance or planning ministries, actually the question is not, and the conversation is not just about emissions and power flows, but it's about jobs. So do these projects create jobs? Do they lower electricity costs? And do they ultimately unlock long-term economic benefits such as growth and local supply chains? So to do this, we actually built a framework to measure the development dividend. So it's not just what you see on the left side, which is improved renewable integration, lower emissions, power flows, but it's actually about the value of those cross-border projects to society and the economy. So things like economic value, long-term job creation, as well as energy security. And probably the energy security findings you might find most interesting. And then we decided to apply this framework to the ASEAN Power Grid, a flagship regional initiative here in Southeast Asia. And we applied it to 12 interconnector projects, which form part of the ASEAN Power Grid. And we focus mostly in the Greater Mekong sub-region, so the northern power system, as well as the power system in the south. So that's Malaysia, Singapore, and Sumatra. But what you're probably most interested in is what we found. Do these projects actually render a development dividend? So let's dive into the first project. So this one is, maybe you can't see the map very well, but this is the Singapore-Sumatra project. It's very topical at the moment. If you're based in Singapore and Indonesia, you will have just heard the announcement that Singapore committed and granted conditional license to import more than 1 gigawatt of clean electricity from Sumatra. What you see here is our most ambitious scenario in our modeling, where we modeled and imposed a carbon constraint when it comes to our modeling. But we also not only imposed the carbon constraint and asked the model to meet that carbon constraint, but also linked the power system in Sumatra to a bigger market, and that bigger market is Singapore. So this interconnector project effectively represents a one-way export of clean electricity from Sumatra to Singapore. And I have to say, out of all of the modeling we've done, this is the link that the model loved the most. And what I mean by this is that you build a 260-kilometer cable, which in the grand scheme of things is a mid-sized infrastructure project. But once you link the two power systems in Sumatra and Singapore, all of a sudden the model started building large-scale renewables. It started building solar, hydro, even geothermal later on, towards the late 2020s and 2030s. And I think that this is the key finding from this, is that actually once you align the incentives, both the push and pull, so the carbon constraint and linking one power system to another, that unlocks a bigger market and therefore creates the incentives for greater renewable scale up in that power system. And it actually brings real economic benefits. So this is very much an ambitious scenario, but if we were to deliver it by 2040, the value of exports from Indonesia could reach 1.3 billion. And to put this into context, that is probably the value of coffee exports from Sumatra at the moment. But actually, Singapore also benefits, and benefits in terms of avoided fossil fuel imports, and actually sees a reduction in its bill, fossil fuel import bill, by 1.5 billion. So you can actually see real economic benefits through this interconnector. Let's present a second case study, and this one is slightly different, and it's not a mega project, the one that you saw before, but it's still quite valuable project. And this is an existing link, but it's a link with a new purpose. So this is the Thailand-Lao PDR. And normally in Southeast Asia, if you're involved in power import-export discussions, you'll normally think that Laos would export hydropower. But what is planned within the ASEAN power grid on the generation side, specifically for this link, is that Laos and Thailand also invest in scaling up solar and wind as well. And actually the benefit of this interconnector, obviously there is a significant increase in export revenue, but the main benefit is actually in diversification. For Laos, that diversification is diversifying its energy system away from hydro, which has sustainability impact on the Mekong, but also actually diversification for Thailand. Diversification because through this interconnector, Thailand actually relies on solar and wind to meet its peak demand and flexibility needs. So in that sense, actually, we are seeing diversification for both energy systems. And maybe stepping away from the case studies into the bigger picture and the key insights, especially for exporting countries, what we found is that energy exports really do create a new industry. And to a certain extent, in places like Sumatra, Laos, and Thailand, they could be a really valuable and sustainable industry. But there is obviously a but. We have to think about how do we scale that up sustainably. So when it comes to resources, we need to make sure that the benefits and the revenues are reinvested back into communities, back into domestic grid infrastructure, back into actually scaling up domestic generation as well. And probably the more interesting finding is just how much of an energy security benefits interconnection in Southeast Asia renders. Actually, the most interesting finding is that importing countries, for example, reduce the cost of having to invest in backup generation and spinning reserve. And that reduction is quite significant. It's certain cases, it's around 20 to 30%. And it's also a case of increasing regional energy security. So you can actually now, most countries can rely on their neighbors to bail them out when they're seeing peak demand. So for example, 20 to 30% of peak demand can be met through those interconnectors. But a final point to end on is that actually realizing the energy security dividend means building trust as well as strong government-to-government agreements to underpin the expansion of that renewable energy infrastructure. And that's what we're trying to do as a next step to this project, is build up an investment toolkit that makes sure that we have the government-to-government and commercial business-to-business arrangements to make sure that we deliver on that development dividend. Thank you. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. What a fabulous presentation. I gather you'll be very busy over drinks. Our next speaker is going to help us widen out the lens to a continental framework. So Anna Lobanova from UN Economic and Social Commission for the Asia Pacific is going to present to us about green power, the Green Power Corridor Framework, which is a structured approach to aligning connectivity projects with the Sustainable Development Goals. And her work is really important. I've had the pleasure of working adjacent to Anna, and her work is helping governments and regional actors not only plan, but also really assess and improve those cross-border energy initiatives. So Anna, over to you.
Thank you so much, Penelope, and good afternoon, everyone. And yes, today I will be talking about the Green Power Corridor Framework, which was developed in ASCAP. And as Penelope mentioned, ASCAP is the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Today morning, you had a chance to listen from our director, who briefly introduced the Commission and introduced the areas we work in, but mainly we work with the governments directly, and we facilitate the dialogue in between governments and provide capacity building and regulatory advisor. So our work is a little bit on the broader side. And today I would like to introduce the framework which was developed. But before I do that, why in general we are talking about power system connectivity? Today it's the crucial topic for our discussion, but what I would like to tell you is that all 53 member states of ASCAP, and we cover everything from Turkey to the Pacific countries, agreed that power system connectivity is the crucial tool for energy transition. And they endorsed the roadmap, which the brief introduction you can see on the slide, but more detailed is available on ASCAP webpage. And this roadmap emphasizes the importance of energy connectivity, that countries agreed to work towards that. And it also emphasizes the areas which they agreed to work on. And it includes not only physical infrastructure to connect to each other, but also capacity building, sharing knowledge, data sharing, financial issues, and so on and so forth. And one of the areas is how to connect to sustainable development goals. And stepping away from UN language, it means that how to connect connectivity projects to environment issues, to gender issues, to social issues, and so on. And today, just very briefly about the framework itself. One thing, it's a work in progress. We're still twisting and finalizing the concept. It will be available very soon on our webpage, but it consists of building blocks, principles, and metrics to help structure and guide the development of connectivity initiatives. And metrics will help to evaluate these initiatives, how to ensure that the issues which I mentioned included in the development of projects. And when we talk about the building blocks, we make sure that the institutional framework is in place, as well as the regulatory framework that includes social acceptance and consultations with civil society, that the infrastructure backbone in there, and of course, that who pays for that? We need to make sure that it's aligned with the financial arrangements and financial mechanism in place. And of course, it was also mentioned during the morning session today, the political acceptance and the political accord is the backbone for development of initiatives in the region and worldwide. And we're very proud to mention that Green Power Corridor framework was taken into account when, during the last COP, COP29 in Azerbaijan, there was a Green Corridor pledge, and the background for this pledge was taken from our Green Power Corridor. So that's one of the implications, and we're moving to the more practical side, how we use and practice this Green Power Corridor framework. So one of those is, yes, during the last COP, it was the background for one of the pledges. Then for the matrix, recently in Georgia, we conducted a workshop where we applied this matrix in practice for the Black Sea submarine cable. And we had a big representation from Georgian experts from energy sectors and from civil society. And what we saw is, this is the real responses from the evaluation, and we saw how experts see the development of this Black Sea submarine cable, which areas, in their opinion, it mostly focuses on and helps to improve. And in the future, it will help to compare with similar projects and to assess which stakeholders are already involved and who needs to be involved further in the process. And also it helps to identify areas for improvement. This is just one of the snapshots from the evaluation which we did in Georgia. There are some more results, and we will be happy to share the full assessment very soon. But the idea is there is that the matrix will help to assess the improvements of the project in the early stage, and to assess which specialist needs to be involved for further development. And then one of the other implications of Green Power Corridor framework, it was taken into account when last year we developed a roadmap for power market development for Central and West Asia, the region which you can see on the screen right now. It's basically Central Asia countries with neighbor countries, which are connected under Economic Cooperation Organization framework. And the roadmap includes overview of the current situation in these countries and existing initiatives and challenges for future development, because there are a lot of connectivity initiatives in the region, and what are the challenges and what are the next steps to overcome these challenges. In short, the next steps in the recommendations include developing a working group, and if we come back to the idea of Green Power Corridor framework and remember the slides with the building blocks, so basically the recommendations follow this building blocks of what needs to be done to move further. And honestly, I'm very, very happy to mention that recently we received a letter from Economic Cooperation Organization that they are actually establishing this working group, and the first meeting will be soon in June in virtual format, and we also invited to participate. So we're very happy to see that our roadmap is actually being implemented. And here is just the QR code to this roadmap if you would like to look further into details what was developed and how Green Power Corridor framework is implemented in practice. And with this, I conclude my presentation, and I am happy to reply any questions you may have further. Thank you.
I think you can all see just how important UN SCAP is to our region. We're very lucky. Our next speaker is Dr. Vladislav Zavadisky. who works for the Central Asian Regional Economic Cooperation Program. So we're going to retain that focus on Central Asia and the Caucasus, and he will be introducing the Caspian Green Energy Corridor, which is a bold initiative really trying to link those renewable energy markets in the Central Asian region with Europe. So please join me in welcoming Vladislav.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm glad to be here, glad to see you all. I will try to prepare a dish here with a lot of ingredients and collect the mosaic because it's quite challenging when we are trying to match a lot of different things which could be not matchable from the first look. Okay, let's start. So first, if we are talking about Central Asia and Caucasian countries, here you can see the current energy landscape, and you can notice that all our countries are not the same in terms of power production. So some of the countries, they have more hydropower as Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, but most of our countries are coal-dependent countries. If we are talking about the renewables, you can see here, so hydropower, and in some countries already they started to develop solar and wind power. So why do we need to develop our renewables? So first, it's a global trend. So climate change, and such agreements like Paris Agreement. Second, local benefits. So we will have a diversified economy, and which will be away from fossil fuels. A lot of jobs will be created because it's a new sector. And as an outcome, we should get public health. And of course, we should increase energy security and independence. Our countries, correct countries, have ambitious targets for green energy transition. So, for instance, Azerbaijan is 30% by 2030. China should be carbon neutral by 2060. Kazakhstan has the same target, the same year, so 2060. Uzbekistan 25% by 2026. It's the next year, so it's very close. Why we can do that? Because we have a huge renewable energy potential. So here you can see the solar energy potential. So the more red area means that more potential we have. Here's the wind. So we can notice that Kazakhstan could be a leader here because of its huge territory and huge wind energy potential. So of course, we have a lot of ongoing renewable energy development support activities. Most of such initiatives are supported on a governmental level. We attracting funding by renewable energy auctions, also for foreign investments. Tariff policy play a critical role here. And already Anna mentioned in a previous big event like COP29, so I think such events, even our current event like ASIF, play a critical role in forcing the green energy transition. And of course, green energy corridors. But I would like to ask the audience, renewable energy, is it good or not? Yes or no? Who can answer? Yes? Okay. Yes. Uh, so the world is a little bit complicated. There's no pure black or pure white. So of course, renewable energy is good, but from the point of view of electrical system operators, it's not good because of the power quality. Ideal situation is when production is equal to consumption, and you will have this beautiful graph of three-phase electrical system. But the reality is not so colorful. And here you can see the real data, real simulation, the power output profile from the wind farm. So you can see that it's, as it said before a lot of times today, renewable energy is unpredictable, intermittent, and here you can see that. Here's a solar power farm output profile, and you can see, of course, when it's a daytime we can have energy, when it's night we cannot have. So again, ideal situation when consumption is equal to production. If not, we can have changes in our frequency. This is not good. Other thing, blackouts. If we will have a big deviation in our frequency, it could cause blackouts. A recent event, I think months ago, in April, in Spain and in Bali, showed us official investigation not completed yet, but some experts are telling that it was caused because of huge renewable power share in the energy system. One of the solutions is to build a large electrical network which has good interconnections. Here you can see Central Asia power network. You can notice that the western part of Kazakhstan is not really good connected with the rest Central Asia network. And I think just 25 seconds. And strengthening the power system interconnection is a key success factor for renewable energy development in the correct region. And Caspian Green Energy Corridor is one of the beautiful example of such initiative. And you can see here project milestone, and it's already blinking, so we'll be very fast. So Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan will plan to export renewable energy through the underwater Caspian cable to Caucasian countries, in particular Azerbaijan and Georgia, and later this project will be interconnected with the Black Sea project for exporting renewable energy to European countries. Also, hydropower will be included in Kyrgyzstan and Georgia. And I think it's time to say thank you for all of you. Thank you very much.
I promise you'll have time to ask questions at the end, because I'm sure many of you have many questions about this excellent project. We now turn to Victor Vanya, who is the CEO of EMA India. And Victor's going to talk about the Himalayan region, where energy trade is no longer a theoretical aspiration, but it's become a data-driven reality. And he's going to present about how advanced analytics have enabled Bhutan and Nepal to trade electricity through India's spot market. So I'm very much looking forward to this. Victor, please come and do your presentation.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I'm here to present a different perspective, mostly from the point of view where Indians are good at, which is IT. And so our experiences building the infrastructure, analytical infrastructure for the cross-border trade, as well as the challenges we faced and some solutions around that. I'll be discussing that. Yeah. So briefly about our firm. Uh, so we are primarily focused in providing technical or analytical tools around trading as well as planning in the South Asian markets, countries, and we are based out of New Delhi and provide services almost all the leading players, maybe some you can see at the bottom which may not be visible here, but all the exchanges, all the leading traders and generators, including RE players, as well as a lot of consulting firms are our clients. And our focus has been to build the data and analytical backbone, which will help participants trade on the market and then make effective decisions when they're operating in the Indian market, especially now since we have a interconnected grid there. And cross-border trading effectively, again, actively going on from the last 3 years on the exchange also. So just briefly introducing our solution. So we have PSTAT, that's the descriptive analytical platform where we harness all the data which will aid participants make decisions on the power market as well as planning their decisions when they are dealing with energy trade. And the second aspect, which is again prescriptive based, which is we provide price forecasting, demand forecasting, as well as generation forecasting. And the third area which we support is decision making, which is POPT, which will help economic dispatch optimization as well as trading, bidding on the exchanges. So that's the tools or services we provide in the entire scheme of things we have. Yeah. Now going to Bhutan and Nepal's cross-border trade. Again, we know that this is again a recent satellite image we taken a few days back. Sorry, I think the pointer is not working. So you see that the top part we have Nepal, and then on the right we have Bhutan. It's a night satellite image where you see the again since it is sparsely populated, we don't see much of a lighting coming up from those two regions, but we have a lot of the bottom picture you see there, it's again half overlapped with the Himalayan belt, which is again a lot of hydro potential due to the snow-fed hydro plants there, which are there again in Nepal and Bhutan. And the terrain is challenging. You have a lot of microclimates. Within that, you go top of a mountain. Even in summer season, you feel that again you need to wear your winter clothes. And when you come down, then it's again hot. So that kind of microclimates are there. And then the water inflow is again challenging. Predicting the weather as well, is again a big challenge there. And I think not many service providers or players are active in that domain in the Himalayan belt. So this is the charts you see here is the cycles or trade cycles which are happening through power markets or power exchange. On the left you see for Bhutan, and on the right you see for Nepal. And one observation you see that again the top one is for the monthly yearly trade, and the bottom chart represents the monthly trade. You see that there are cycles for both as well as Bhutan and Nepal. So what usually happens is in the winter months, due to almost all the rivers get dry and the inflow, much inflow won't be there, and then all the hydro plants dry up, and then they have to depend on the cross-border trade and purchase from the Indian market. And while in summer you have plenty of water coming in, and then now we are in that season going on. So these two cross-border countries want to sell power on the exchange. Whatever surplus they have, they want to sell on the exchanges. So that's the cycle which goes on annually. But this cycle, you see that the intensity is increasing. Means their buy and sell is growing year on year, and then this is I can say there's a lot of emphasis on this cross-border trade, with especially on the power exchanges. So to do cross-border trading, we have, again, since we have a market with India, so now each of these countries have their own system operator and their trading wing or institution in place. Now the challenge here is when we are operating on an exchange, you have to uh, uh, manage your generation and also manage your load efficiently, and then come up with some volume. The system operator will decide the volume, how much buy or sell has to be done, and that comes to the trader, and then trader goes and then decides the price, because it's again an auction which goes on in the spot markets in India. And then that's sent to the exchanges for trade. All along this activity, again, there's a lot of uncertainty or volatility involved. Uncertainty comes from the load side, because the load, again, is very volatile in the Himalayan belt as such. There's a lot of uncertainty, and then we need to predict efficiently, at least on day ahead and then real time basis. And similar is the issue with the generation side. The hydro inflow is very volatile, and then we need to have accurate predictions in place, and efficient management, generation management in place for that. Once we decide on these two aspects, again, that's a system operator's problem or challenge to solve. And then we come with the price volatility. As we know that, again, we have a very granular and a liquid market, which has 96 time block wise resolution, and the price volatility also is very high, because they have to decide when they're buying or selling. They have to efficiently decide where to, in which areas to buy, in which areas to sell, and the volume to buy, and so that they maximize the revenue when they are selling, and then minimize the cost when they're buying. So that's the challenge they have to solve. This and since we have also a real-time balancing mechanism, so the problem gets complicated, because once we decide this buy and sell volume and price on day-ahead basis, we come on to the real time, and then we have to also stick to our schedules. We have to ensure that our load doesn't change much, as well as our demand doesn't change, and also whatever interface which is happening, which is the balancing market, that also stays intact. That's the challenge these countries have to solve. So again, with cross-border, since we have 15-minute time block resolution, so everything should be done on 15-minute block basis, because I need to manage my generation, manage my load, and my trade also within 15-minute block-wise basis. That's the efficiency we need to bring, and then there's a lot of data infrastructure required, and communication IT technology infrastructure is required to manage this efficiently, and then that's where the challenge comes into play. And again, most of the, since the Indian market is quite mature, we've been having markets, and then they've been matured in the last 15 years. So now the challenge is to bring Bhutan and Nepal, or other cross, even Bangladesh, to the same level, so that they can efficiently operate in the market without any loss when they're doing this activity. So one first challenge we have, we usually face with the Himalayan countries, data acquisition, because we may have most of the projects and start with establishing my generating plants, putting up the transmission infrastructure, and then the third leg will be the SCADA system. After that, there's nothing done much. So now the problem is, now when we are trading, we need to have an efficient energy management system in place, which will help them, help the assets. How do we optimize our generation and manage my load efficiently, and also the cross-border transactions which I am doing, how do I maximize the revenue or minimize the cost when I'm trading. So that's the technical decision making as well as analytical infrastructure which is required, which has, again, since we have a lot of remotely situated plants, hydro plants, especially in Bhutan and Nepal, getting data is a challenge. That too, a reliable and real-time data is a challenge. And then having a two-way communication between the load dispatcher or the trading system and the generators, and that operating it reliably 24/7, that's been a challenge. Again, that's a challenge we are also trying to solve with our stakeholders, and when we go and to the ground, I think we see a lot of technical problems because many plants don't have even mobile network, proper communication infrastructure is lacking, as well as skilled IT team members are won't be there. So those all things, even small issues become a big challenge in such terrain or such locations. Yeah, generation forecasting. So since, as we said, the inflow forecasting is the key, and then since we have microclimates and then a lot of volatility in terms of inflow with respect to the dams, and then suddenly one again water inflow comes in, again suddenly it goes off, and these are challenges because since we have a lot of penalties coming when we are doing cross-border trading, so our challenge is to minimize that penalties and then bring efficiency into the system. And again, putting up water monitoring stations is again has been another issue where initially they work and then someone has to go to such remote areas and then keep maintaining them and ensure that they operate all the time. Yeah. So this is one of the portfolio map we have where we try to optimize. So the dotted black line is the market price line where we try to, when let's say when we're doing cross-border trade, we have market prices touching the top roof, and then usually in the solar house we have prices very low. So where we try to optimize our pondage with the generation we have, generators we have, where we can optimize the pondage and then make sure that the system operator or when we're buying and selling, we do it in an efficient way. Also, we have to make sure that the pondage levels are maintained with respect to all the dams we have in the country. That's again a optimization real-time problem we have to solve. And finally, just before I close, this is a price chart of today's price in the day-ahead market. So you might have heard in the news that the prices have touched during the solar hours to zero in the Indian market. That's been a news-making event from the last, I think, first time we have touched that low price in the summer. You see that during the day hours, the prices have touched almost to zero. You have around 43,000 megawatt of solar. That's why this is all cell bid, the red one, and the blue one is the buy bid. You have 43,000 of sell, and then you have very less buy bid on the exchange. And then night hours, we are deficit, buy is higher than sell, and then we have deficit in pricing touching to around $120. And then the day hours are close to zero. So here when we're trading on the exchange, again for cross-border, even every participant, when we are selling right now, Bhutan and Nepal are selling, the problem is they have to, how to avoid this zone where the prices are low and then optimize my generation, mostly the pondage, so that I sell during the night hours where I get the maximum revenue. So that's, to solve this problem, you have a lot of analytical and real-time management has to go on. So that's the challenge we are trying to solve. Thank you.
All right. As you can see, we have a number of very interesting challenges in our region, both involving data, infrastructure, diplomacy, coordination, regulatory harmonisation. And so I'm going to invite our speakers now to come up onto the stage. And while you're just coming up with some questions, and you can post them into the Q&A in the app, and you can upvote them, you can choose which questions you most want to hear about. I have a question for each of our speakers, a very brief question, just to give you all time to think about what you really want to know about, what your burning issues are. So the first question I'm going to give to Ivana, and I thought I might ask you, how might your investing for a development toolkit be used by ministers for finance or planning to justify investment in interconnection projects beyond the kind of traditional energy metrics?
Yeah, great question, Penny, and that's specifically the target audience for the investment toolkit. So the idea was that sometimes energy ministries don't necessarily talk to finance ministries, but actually when those projects go to finance ministries, they're just another infrastructure asset. So this infrastructure asset normally competes for financing in very tight fiscal space with roads, bridges, other infrastructure assets. So how do you capture the long-term economic value? And that was the reason why we came up with the development dividend work, is to capture the long-term economic value the same way that you capture it, for example, when it comes to building road infrastructure and the trade that enables. It's the same principle for interconnectors. How did they enable trading? How did they enable new industries, such as an export industry in an exporting country? How do they enable jobs and supply chains? Actually, our research says a lot of new jobs are being created, especially high-value jobs like engineering, construction, and then afterwards a lot in operations and maintenance. So it's actually strengthening the investment case to those who don't think in terms of power flows or gigawatts or in terms of carbon emissions. So it's speaking the language of the financiers and the investors.
And not just energy wants. I mean, I really must commend this toolkit. It is fabulous, and I would encourage countries to have a look at it. It's some really, really important work for us. Anna, I was hoping to ask you, the question that keeps cropping up in my mind is whenever we talk about these kind of green power corridors and these kind of regional cooperation platforms, how do you ensure that they're inclusive and they also kind of beneficial for both smaller economies and fragile grid systems? How do you manage that?
Thank you. This is a great question. One of the things, and it actually comes to the general mandate of how international organizations operate. We are very lucky that we have network around the world, and we can bring examples from all across the regions. And during the previous session, for example, we've heard a great presentation about Africa and about the power pools there and the way they organize. And we have also examples from Southeast Asia or from Europe. And it's very much up to the countries to decide which model they would like to follow. And from our experience, there is no right or wrong answer. And we can't force countries to follow this or that model. That's up to them how to define the rules of the game, if we may say this way. And we happy to support them in their journey and to make sure that it's fair for all the players involved. Thank you.
We're very lucky. Thank you. Vladislav, can I ask you, so one of the questions that struck me when I was listening to your presentation, so you're connecting Central Asia with the EU. So how do you ensure that project developers are both balancing those regional priorities that you have within the Central Asian region with the kind of imperative for this export-orientated infrastructure?
Okay, thank you for your question. I think these two parts, they are not in a contradiction with each other. So it's like a win-win solution. First, this interconnection will increase the whole region energy system stability. And the second, you've seen big ambitious plans for increasing the share of renewable energy in our region. By default, it should decrease the stability of energy system, and having this link, the region will only benefit and will sell the clean and renewable energy to Europe, where I think it's not a secret, the prices, electricity prices are higher than in our region. So I think it's a win-win solution. Thank you.
Fabulous. I'm really feeling quite energized by this session. I'm quite excited by it, which may either make me an absolute energy wonk, but the idea of greater regional cooperation in the energy sector can only be a good thing. Victor, moving on to you. You talked about some of the challenges with the limited kind of SCADA infrastructure, terrain-based forecasting in the Himalayan region. So how can development finance institutions and multilateral donors better support that kind of data acquisition needed to and support decisions around grid modernisation, but also regional power trading?
Yeah. Initially, that multilateral organizations, their focus has been in building the infrastructure, the transmission infrastructure, and also supporting the countries come up with appropriate rules and regulations. Now, when we started implementing and going and started trading, I think these issues came up, which again, the basic data, acquiring data, and then making decisions for trading and then operating the plans, so that become a challenge. And now multilateral institutions are again sensitized towards this now. From the past few years, they all started funding these kind of engagements, and then building up, bringing together the technological infrastructure or players who can support this. And that's we've seen again, because our engagement with USAID is one of the examples of that. And I think there's a lot of active participation around this from all the multilateral organizations. And I think some active participation should be there from the management from the other countries, the cross-border countries, and that's I think that's one area these multilateral organizations can work further to build a consensus and then come up with more engagements which will solve these problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we've got 3 questions in the app. I struggle to believe that the people in this room have only got 3 questions after these fabulous presentations. So your options are, you can either upvote, you can put a new question in the app, you can upvote an existing question, or if you'd like to form a queue behind one of the microphones, I'm also willing to take questions from the floor. Otherwise, I get to just keep asking all of my questions, and they're great questions, but I'm sure you've got better ones. So don't hesitate to come up with one of those 3 options. So on that basis, I will take a question from the app, which I think is a really interesting one, and anyone from the panel can, or all can tackle this one. And the question that got asked was, how can regional power grids balance national energy security priorities with a shared goal of integration and sustainability? Anna, do you want to take that one first?
Sorry. Thank you. It is a very good question, and Vladislav presented an example from Spain where they had a blackout, and of course the question about grid stability is the burning question for countries right now. And so the first, of course, for the countries before they start developing connectivity, is to make sure that inside the country, let's say everything is fine with the grid. Everything works the way it should be. And then you go to their neighbors. But what is important also is not to see connectivity as interdependency. You depend on others the same way as others depend on you, and this is important to understand. And this is coming back to the first question you asked me about the benefits. Connectivity works when both sides or all the sides involved benefit from this exchange. And this is when it's efficient, and this is when it works. This is the only scenario when it works, because otherwise you will start thinking about your security, your stability, and so on and so forth. So to make sure that everyone benefits, this is the first, this is the starting point to developing connectivity. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to take Ayushi's question?
Yeah, maybe I have a question. Do we have any country in the world who has no trade relationship with other countries? I think no. The same. I think here is the same story. So we cannot be isolated in the modern world. So we have no way to be interconnected even in energy sector.
I'm from Australia. We're a very long way from anywhere. Even New Zealand's like 4.5 hours flight away. But yeah, I mean, we are even talking about connecting up potentially to Singapore. So I do take your point. Even in energy, we are, even the islanded nations are looking at regional interconnection.
But energy, it's not only electricity. I think
No.
it's gas,
Hydrogen.
fuel, hydrogen. So
Ammonia.
you're not isolated.
You sometimes feel it. Would anybody else like to take that question? Ivana?
Yeah, maybe to unpack that a little bit, especially the energy security angle. So it depends on how you define national security. So if you define it as security of supply, or whether you define it as diversification, or whether you define it as power system stability. And as an energy planner and regulator, you'd probably have to balance all of those. But I would say the interconnection and electricity trading and other types of molecules and electrons, I think they really take the first two. So the security of supply and the diversification, especially what we found in Southeast Asia, because a lot of energy systems in Southeast Asia rely on fossil fuel imports, and that they are expensive and sometimes unpredictable. So actually, then diversifying by tapping into different resources is a smart energy security strategy, in my view. So it's not just relying on coal or natural gas, but also importing hydro, importing wind, solar from your neighbors. I think that is a secure energy system. On the stability and predictability point, certainly in the UK, we are using interconnectors to meet peak demand. Actually, probably around 20% of our peak demand is met through interconnectors. So, but actually, probably on the stability point and back to the Spain incident, it depends on how strong your power system management is and whether you have invested in your domestic grid infrastructure. So maybe on the third point, it depends, subject to reinforcing your own domestic grid as well as trading across borders.
I'd like to add some perspective to that from the Indian side. So I think that's been a very challenging issue for the Indian market, again, having cross-border interconnections. Just I remember in 2012 when I came out of a meeting from the external affairs. I think that's way back before this all interconnections thing was at a very nascent stage. Again, then once I stepped out of the office, then we got a call that we had a blackout with the Indian grid. So that after that, it's been a tumultuous, I think, not a smooth ride. But again, in the recent conflict with our neighbors, we had, I think, a month back, we had a security issue with the neighboring country. There again, at the same time, what happened is we saw a lot of hacking attempts happening on the IT infrastructure related to the Indian power system operation. So again, for a week or so, we had to take down all the systems. And then again, there are also issues with our neighboring countries, and then there's a lot of scrutiny happening with all the trades which happen with India, and then every now and then we keep revising our again approvals which come with the neighboring countries. So again, because of political issues or other security issues, and I think there are no clear answers, because I think technically speaking, there's a lot of benefit for all the countries involved in the cross-border trade with India to have a efficient market integration with us, but the very other reasons are dominating the, I can say, discussion here, and that's been a challenging 15-20 years in this journey, and we don't have clear solutions on how this will be solved, or how we'll be moving ahead in this direction.
Thank you. And thank you for the fabulous question. That question was from Ayushi Devi. So our next question is, I'm going to amalgamate two of the questions we've got. We've now got questions flowing through on the app, so don't miss out on your chance to ask a question. But I am going to combine two of them because I think they combine quite nicely. We have a question here from Albert Segura about all of these interconnection models show huge benefits, economic, social, environmental. Why is it taking years and years to get permits, consents, and regional agreements? And then the other question I want you to, I'm sorry to do this to you, combine with it is a great question from Edward Almedo, who's asking about how do you manage all these different kind of regulatory policies as well? So it's really a question about the regulatory side and the planning and permitting. How do you improve that? How do you streamline it? What can we do to fix it?
Maybe I'll start, because as I mentioned before, in UN we see different scenarios from all over the world, and spoiler, in some parts of the world they solved this problem, including European Union, or in Africa with a South African power pool. So there are options how to solve it. And back to my presentation and to the slide with the building block, in the very center of that was political accord. And we truly believe that the first step to agree on development of connectivity projects is to have political accord, and to have this first step where countries agree that they are in line with each other to move towards the development of the project. Because then, once you have this first step, then it's all details, let's put it this way. But coming back to your first question, why it's so difficult, there are a number of challenges. It is costly, and you need to reduce risk for investors, and you need to develop regulations which are in favor, and all the other stuffs. But again, coming back to, once you have the agreement between countries on the very high level that you want to develop towards this direction, then all the other is details. That's what we believe in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Maybe one more point. I think it's good to highlight the role of multilateral partners here, for instance, ADB, because they can bring not only finance resources, but expertise, and they can put all stakeholders on one table and to discuss and negotiate, and at the end to come to the one solution.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to answer those questions?
Maybe just on the permits and consents. Actually, the permits and consents is really interesting question, because a lot of the permitting for these projects is done at the sub-national level. So because it's done at the sub-national level, you need to invest a lot of time in community buy-in. And sometimes big initiatives like energy corridors or the ASEAN Power Grid are big initiatives. So how do you make sure that you translate that into a language that ensures community buy-in? So it's actually much more about engaging the local stakeholders, ensuring that communities genuinely see and feel the benefits, whether that is a job in your local community, working in construction and O&M, or as an engineer and reskilling, whether it is feeling the actual improved air quality. So actually making the benefits tangible to communities. That I think is probably the trick that we're missing, especially when we plan these really big initiatives.
Thank you. I know that in Australia we've had problems in the past where when people go out to do these kind of community stakeholder meetings, they bring in biscuits bought in the supermarket into rural areas instead of asking the local kind of rural community to bake their own cakes and bring them. And the second you ask people to bring their own cakes, it's a much nicer meeting. Just as a heads up, always homemade cakes rather than store-bought. You will find amazing powers of agreement. We've had a couple of questions come through about the Spanish blackout and about, you know, there was a question at the blackout moment, the Iberian Peninsula is mainly powered by renewables. Spain is connected into the European grid. What measures should be taken to avoid this type of situation? Anyone want to take that?
Yeah. I think, again, strengthening energy system and interconnection, because Spain it has a very weak connection with the rest of European Union energy grid, and one of the solution it could be to build other links. One more is to introduce more energy storage system into the grid. Thank you.
No, thank you. Does anyone else want to talk about the Spanish blackout? Controversial subject.
But again, I have to mention that officially there is no official results of the investigation.
Yes,
We
I
don't
agree.
know the reason officially.
Yes.
So still, the process is ongoing. So let's wait, and later let's decide what we can do and advise.
A very sensible approach. We had a
Yeah.
famous blackout in Australia that got blamed on the renewables sector, and it turned out it was actually not caused by the renewables sector, but they copped the blame. Um, so that actually takes us very neatly to our next question, which comes from Jason Paragua about, can renewable energy alone handle baseload power needs, or will we always need backup power sources? Anyone?
Till now, I think based on the experience, we always need backup power sources, and that's been the experience with at least the South Asian market. Given that we have a lot of solar, especially leaving aside the hydro, and we couldn't find ways to utilize the excess solar generation. So as I showed in my slide, that we have around 40 gigawatt of surplus solar pumping into the grid, and then we only have hardly any takers to take that energy, and there is no reliable solution yet to manage that efficiently and then make it as a base load or round the clock power. And there are pilot projects going on, but I think it will take time for some few years to get to that stage where we can completely rely on that kind of an infrastructure which will support the RTC power. Yeah.
Did you want to say as well?
Yes, so I think in the UK, maybe if I could use that example, we'll find out in 2030. Because we are planning on a clean power system by 2030, and we are now increasingly talking about a flexible power system. And I think that the question that we're looking into is, what are then the sources of flexibility in the system with mostly renewables. So in the UK, the renewables are wind, solar, offshore wind. So we are looking at ways to firm those renewables. And I think we're looking at 3 solutions and scaling them in the next 5 years. So the first one is storage, and storage both in terms of the millisecond response, but also in terms of long duration storage, things like BESS, pumped hydro. The second source of flexibility, interconnectors. So we want to have around 18 gigawatt of interconnection with our neighbors. So we'll rely on our neighbors for backup. And then the third one is demand response. It's how do we actually use assets like electric vehicles to provide and balancing in our system. So these 3 areas, and ask me in 2030.
You can also ask her for more information over drinks.
Maybe just a couple of more examples, because the question doesn't specify which renewables we talk about, and there are countries in the world which almost 100% hydro, and in this case, yes, it is possible. But of course, there are unique scenarios, and you need resources for that, and it very much depends on the landscape. But if there is a combination that, yes, let's come back to Ivana's scenario. And I also recently just saw in the news that Vatican is going 100% renewables. So there are other scenarios with countries with no hydro resources as well.
Interesting. I'm going to have to do some research on that. The Vatican going 100% renewable. Fabulous. We've got 2 last questions to close out the session. The first one I think is actually probably for you, Victor, but obviously everyone's willing to help. And that's, what is the impact of poor demand forecasting on the power exchange market?
Yeah. Right now, we have a ratio of 30-70 between the day-ahead market and real-time market. Again, this ratio is mostly has to do with the uncertainty or the forecasting uncertainty which is there, because I'm not able to forecast efficiently on day-ahead basis. So now I have to go and adjust my deviations in the real-time market. So that's again, that number tells you that 70-30 is the ratio we have. But with respect to renewables, especially wind and solar, the errors have been very high, the forecasting errors, and then most of the players right now prefer to go and operate on the real-time market rather than take positions in the day-ahead market, because we don't have accurate means to forecast on day-ahead basis. And with respect to load forecasting, we see that the error percentages are varying between 5 to 10%. So that's the error we see in the at least Indian sphere, and that has been increasing in the recent past because of the climate change impacts. Again, one example being the one of the coldest summers, May month we have in India this year. And that's again a problem to solve. Again, weather has been a big challenge for doing generation as well as load forecast.
Sounds like a good data solution might be required.
Yeah, correct. Someone has to find a way to solve the weather forecasting problem.
And then our last question for this afternoon is a really great one from Hannah Lord. And it's, to what extent is investment in hard infrastructure and interconnectors in particular dependent on the development of soft infrastructure like markets, governance arrangements and regulations, or vice versa? Which one's the chicken, which one's the egg?
It's very much a chicken and egg situation for sure. From the experience we see, we definitely see that the regulations and the right regulations can support the development of hard infrastructure, basically by de-risking and by inviting investors, including private sector, into the projects, and right regulations and institutional arrangements definitely can help.
So maybe if I could reframe the question, is it the software or the hardware? I think it's both. But actually, I would say it's about learning by doing. So it's, for big projects like the ASEAN Power Grid, it's just get a project going. So start piloting and pilot the software and the hardware at the same time as this agile project management, but scaled up on a regional level or multiple regions. So it's actually start with a project, learn by doing, both on the regulatory side, what works in terms of bilateral, multilateral arrangements, and then scale that. Similarly, build a small line, then upgrade to a bigger, and then a massive 3,200 kilometer subsea link, like Australia, Singapore. So I think it's much more about learning by doing, taking small steps in both the software and the hardware that I think are the key to success.
Thank you.
Yeah, every long journey starts with the first step. So let's do it. And I think also, already mentioned, and my colleagues, transferring best practices could be helpful here. And the role of such organization like ADB, Correct Program, other organization essential. So, but again, we have to start with something, maybe one small pilot project, and later escalate, scale it, and we can have a success for the regions.
If I can be, I've noticed we've got a little bit more time. So if anyone has a question and wants to come up to the microphone, please feel free. Yes, do you want to, there's a microphone just behind you.
Thank you. I have a specific question to Victor. I'll take a case of Nepal and India, building transmission infrastructure. So there are always debates for building of transmission infrastructures and who funds the line, who books the capacity of the line. We have been able to negotiate and build consensus on some of the lines, but this has been a chronic type of debates between the two countries. So we have policy disparities for financing of transmission line. India has a policy that whoever uses this line should book the line and, upfront, finance upfront. Whereas Nepal's policy is that since it's a cross-border transmission line between the two sovereign countries, let's build the line, Nepal side, Nepal will fund, and Indian side, India. So the arguments here is that who uses the line first? Who is the first or immediate beneficiary? And that is a matter of interpretation, I think, because some countries say that, okay, you are selling power first, so you are the first beneficiaries. Well, the seller can argue that, okay, your system will be benefited by our power, our hydropower. You have, majority of renewables. So this is a matter of interpretation. Who is the first beneficiary? Who is to book the line first? And booking line is,
Can I cut you off there, because I just need to make sure he has enough time to answer that question.
Okay, I'm just finishing.
Okay.
So, have you studied some specific, standard models of financing cross-border line between the two, sovereign countries? I just want to know if you have some, studies there.
Sir, what I can share is in our experience we have cross states, because India has many states. There is infrastructure built which transmits power from one state to another. So the way cost allocation is done is we have load flow studies which will determine how much flow is happening between the states, and mostly the buyer is supposed to bear the cost, and the burden is on the buyer side to bear the cost. That's been the philosophy of pricing in the Indian market. Maybe that can be one of the, you can say, ways you can try to solve this problem also. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to take that question? And then if people want to just fall in a line behind the microphone, would any of our other speakers like to address that question about who should bear the price burden? No? Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. Ryder Rogers, USAID. My question is for Vladislav. Thank you for the presentation to all of our presenters. But my question was, for a country like Kazakhstan in Central Asia, does exporting to Europe, exporting their renewables, does that actually serve in some ways as a disincentive for reducing their own dependence upon coal-fired power plants? It seems that when you have a willing buyer that's willing to buy up as much as they're able to produce, you have to wonder when the country will get around to reducing their own coal-fired powered plants. So just interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, from the first look, it looked like that. But again, based on the modern technologies, conventional power couldn't be fully replaced with renewables because of the electrical system stability. By increasing the share of renewables, at the same time, we decreasing the stability of energy system. That's why taking into account ambitious plans for introducing such big renewable power in the nearest future, it's better to have our system well interconnected with others. And in addition to introducing renewables, our region has big plans to introduce nuclear power. Uzbekistan started to realize. Kazakhstan already had a referendum last year, and population agreed to build a first nuclear power plant. And by the way, also coal generation is development still. So not only renewables. That's why having the possibility for exporting electricity is beneficial for our region. I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
Just a couple of things to add, because I was in Kazakhstan just last week for Astana International Forum, and To add to nuclear, yes, Kazakhstan is building 3 reactors in the next years, and Kazakhstan actually has net zero strategy 2060, where they emphasized all the steps, how they're going to get to net zero during this time frame. And in terms of corridors, also important to mention that there is also Uzbekistan on the other side. So it's not only Kazakhstan on this side of Caspian Sea, the power will go theoretically from Uzbekistan through Kazakhstan, then to Azerbaijan, and so on. And as Uzbekistan has a great potential for solar, because it's basically flat and you can build as much solar there as you want. So just answering your question, it's not only Kazakhstan, but Kazakhstan has net zero scenario 2060. Thank you.
I've just got 2 last questions. So I've actually got the gentleman behind you, and then, but I'm getting the red flashing light. So if everyone's okay, I promise I will have you out of here. No Australian is ever going to stand in between you and drinks. So we will be finished by 5:30, I promise. But we've got some more questions.
Okay, I'm Indonesian, but based in Singapore at ADB office. For Ivana, Singapore's Energy Market Authority has allowed importation of power from Indonesia. But in March, the Indonesian Energy Minister Bahlil said, not so sure to allow exportation. Have you had a chance to present your first few slides to the minister?
The short answer is no, but very happy at the opportunity to, because it just, especially the Singapore-Sumatra link makes a lot of sense, both for Singapore and Sumatra. And it does require a lot of investment, so maybe that is the main barrier. But I think that the benefits far outweigh the costs, and actually the benefits to Indonesia and Sumatra, both in terms of renewables, emissions, and maybe the way to go with Balil is jobs.
Thank you. We just had one last question. Oh, sorry. 2 last questions. If we could squeeze in your question as well, I promise we will. But your question, sir.
Grayson Hefner, just a quick question for Ivana. So the UK, I think, is one of the most subsea connected countries in the world. And that's a big challenge here in Southeast Asia, archipelago. Any suggestions for getting successful subsea connectors going?
Where do I start? Start with the project. Again, Singapore-Sumatra is a really good one because it's a really short project. So it's actually 260 kilometers. The UK is 765, which is the longest in the world. So I'd say start with Singapore-Sumatra. It's just 100 kilometers subsea. Then I would say build the investment case. And then possibly the supply chain, because I think that's probably the toughest part about subsea. It's the HVDC supply chain, and how do you get those cables? How do you plan them? And maybe just building that supply chain of the cable, the engineering, and the people with the expertise to deliver them. So start with the Singapore, Sumatra, and then build the supply chain.
Okay, we are going to squeeze in our one last question.
Hi, I'm Tanya with International Rivers. Just a question primarily for Ivana, but maybe it could go for the rest as well, is in relation to, I was interested that you raised the issue that in relation to the Laos-Thailand connection, that there is consideration around the sustainability of more hydro on the Mekong. So I was just wondering, your slide also showed, though, the connection with Myanmar, as well as connections with Vietnam. And I know that there have been really major concerns about conflict, as well as the lack of civic space. So I was just wondering, FCDO has stood up and said, raised concerns about it as well. So just wondering how that's factoring into the advice that you're giving to the region, as well as for the others on the panel, how issues around civic space and conflict are factoring into your considerations. Thanks.
So Myanmar is a tough question. So our response in Myanmar is mostly humanitarian. So we don't engage on energy cooperation with the regime in Myanmar. But what I will say is that so the Thailand, Laos, and cooperation in the Greater Mekong sub-region, the Lao-Thailand link is a good case of diversification, and it is, I think, our work, especially in this region, has focused on diversifying the economy, so diversifying the energy system as well. So actually moving away not just from hydro, but into other sources like wind and solar. So I would say technical cooperation where we can, and humanitarian aid where possible, and probably revisit when there is political change in Myanmar.
Does anybody else want to answer that last question? Or maybe we'll save that one for over drinks, watching people's faces. But please join me in thanking what has been a fantastic panel of speakers. We've got some world-leading experts here, so we're very grateful. Now, if any of you do have any further questions for them, I'm going to offer them up. They're going to be up here for a little bit longer, and then I presume they'll be upstairs as well. So please come and ask away. This is a great opportunity. They've also, on their slides, you'll notice that a number of them have actually linked to the investment toolkit, to the SCAP Green Corridors report. You had a link to the Carrick report and some research that you'd done. I really commend you to read it. It's some really fantastic research, so well done. Thank you.